So a friend of mine recently informed me that the tin can was invented in 1810. No? Okay, not that interesting until you realize that this came only half a century later. Sometimes it takes quite a while for our best innovations to take root and get embedded into society. But we don't have a while, right? We are facing a devastating environmental crisis. I was recently involved in an innovation which was misunderstood in its time. We mapped the scale of the global forest system, showing that our Earth is home to just over 3 trillion trees. This was a staggering scale of our understanding, but we did get criticized for missing the trees in the Vatican City, so we've updated the number. But these models don't only help us to understand where trees exist now, they also help us to see where they would naturally exist. And we realize that we've halved the scale of this global forest system. But at the same time, we could see that outside of urban and agricultural lands, there's actually a great land of opportunity. The degraded ecosystems that are not being used by humans. And if we could protect them in the long term, there's room for just over 1 trillion new trees to recover. That's a third of that scale. And if they could recover to maturity, they'd capture around a third of our climate change goals, the carbon that we need to fight this global threat. When this information hit the headlines, it went truly and devastatingly viral. It gave rise to the launch of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Both WWF and the World Economic Forum launched their Trillion Trees campaigns. And when the President of the United States started planting trees on the White House lawn, we thought it was just too good to be true. But unfortunately, that's exactly what it was. Because many people saw this as an opportunity to exclude people and to plant vast rows of carbon-capturing trees. These carbon farms are not nature, and they are not supporting the people who depend on it. So when the headlines started to come, instead of focusing on the potential of nature to help, they focused on the risks of restoration done wrong. And I want to stress that, of course, the wrong tree in the wrong place can undoubtedly do a lot more harm than good. But it's worth noting that is the same for everything that has ever existed. If you stick a toothbrush in the wrong place, it'll do more harm than good, so I'm told. Of course, we are not going to be getting out of this by engineering our way out of it. This doesn't tackle the underlying threat, the underlying challenge that we're facing, which is ultimately the inequitable distribution of wealth on our planet. We have a small number of people with a huge, massive environmental footprints, but then we've also got billions of people living day to day, trapped in an economy where they have very few non-extractive alternatives. But there's a growing body of research that suggests that these are the people that actually hold our greatest opportunity for hope. Because if we can redistribute the wealth of this planet towards those land stewards, they are the ones who can find the sustainable options. And then in time, the regenerative options that help to build a world in which we can all thrive. Global restoration is not about excluding people and securing nature. It's about finding and empowering the millions of local land stewards, the indigenous populations, the farmers, the communities who are the stewards of nature on our planet. And that is the mission of Restor, a free online digital platform to support the movement where any local landowner can draw around their land and get free information about the carbon and water and biodiversity. Just like Restor, this example in Ethiopia, where you can see the huge footprint of coffee production as forests have been removed. But as you zoom in, it looks like that forest is pretty much intact. And that's because that's exactly what it is. Instead of removing the forest, they plant the trees underneath the canopy of this beautiful, intact rainforest, which traps water and nutrients, so those trees grow really well without the need for fertilizers and irrigation, which means they make more profits. And when nature is the profitable option, you know you can't stop it from recovering across landscapes. That is why all the farmers in the nearby region are allowing trees to return on their ecosystems, so that they can have more profitable coffee production. On Restor, Restor gains free information about the biodiversity, the carbon, but most importantly, he gains visibility to us, his customers, who can now see where every coffee comes from. And that agency has meant that his profits have gone up threefold since coming online. And he is just one of hundreds of thousands, in fact, millions of local community-led projects that are now visible to the world through this platform, making the basis of a bottom-up movement spanning 16% of that global potential, Companies can build portfolios to invest in, and individuals can find products that we can buy. And on top of that, governments can also now track their targets towards their biodiversity goals. And this brings me to one of my favorite stories, which is the government of Costa Rica, a winner in the first year of the Earthshot Prize. About 30 years ago, deforestation rate was at a peak in the country, but instead of allowing that to progress, they initiated their Payment for Ecosystem Service program, distributing wealth to local landowners across the country. And on Restor, we can now see that there's been improvements in carbon, improvements in tree cover, but we've not known what happened to the integrity of those systems until right now. For the last couple of years, we've had students across Costa Rica recording the soundscapes of nature. To a scientist, those soundscapes look something like this. This is the soundscape of a natural, intact rainforest that has never been removed. But until about 30 years ago, most of the country would have sounded a bit more like this. This is the static of a degraded pasture in the region. You hear some birds and insects, but the variation is gone. But as a result of that incredible Payment for Ecosystem Service program, the average soundscape of a natural regeneration site in the country now sounds like this. The frequency variation is back. The birds and insects have recovered. And on top of that, what you're quietly hearing in the background there is the sound of howler monkeys. You do not recover large-bodied organisms like that unless there's nutrients and resources to support them. And this means we are talking about true ecological recovery, to 86% of that intactness. This makes it the first ever evidence for national-scale biodiversity recovery. And what's really exciting is we also correlated it with the sound of the 100,000 most frequently downloaded songs on the internet. And they sound statistically more like this than they do to the degraded pasture. Now that sounds lovely, and it might sound a bit wishy-washy, but it's absolutely baked into our evolution. We've evolved in ecosystems where the sounds of high and low frequency noises indicate the availability of foods and the nutrients we need to survive. So this doesn't mean that Lady Gaga sounds like a howler monkey. It means that she has tapped into our evolutionary preference for the high and low frequency sounds of nature that supports us. And the most incredible thing about all of this is that it happened at a time of economic growth for Costa Rica. As nature recovered, so then the economy started to boom, proving that just like Destas and the thousands of other projects across Restor, that nature can be the economic preference for people. And when that happens, you cannot stop it from thriving. This collaboration was made possible because of the Earthshot Prize, and we're now encouraging governments and companies to do the same thing, because global restoration is not an environmental challenge, it's a societal one. We need to distribute the wealth of our planet to the stewards of nature across the globe so that they can find the sustainable and regenerative opportunities that can build a world where we and nature can both thrive together. Thank you so much for listening.